Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and over the next hour, we're going to talk a lot of Saints. We'll talk some LSU Tigers. We'll sprinkle in a little Tulane Green Wave, and we got a great guest for you tonight. Normally, we have two guests, but this guest is so good, we're just going to do an hour. My good friend Mike Detillier of WWL 870 AM Radio, and Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot,
for coming
Eric.
back.
My pleasure.
Love having you.
Thanks a lot.
Mike, before we get started, first of all, tell the folks a little bit about what you guys are doing over at 870 and about that incredible draft book that you're putting out each and every year.
Well, it never ends. You know, it's
Right.
52 weeks out of the year, 365, and basically just kind of catching up now on all the juniors. And it's a record year for juniors. The new CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, has changed the world. In essence, the NFL gets the best of both worlds now. They don't have to pay all that huge signing bonus to all these early first-round picks. And secondly, the slotting between what a third-round pick and a rookie free agent gets has hardly any difference. It's opened the doors for all the juniors to say, why should I come back and play another season?
Right.
And you're going to probably have over 100 juniors declare.
Wow.
Record-setting across the board. Already 6 at USC declared. We're seeing, 5 or 6 at LSU, 5 at Florida, 4 at South Carolina. If you're a good football team, Jimmy Johnson told me this years ago, Eric, 2 things are certain when you're a dominant college team. You attract players that would never come to your school if you're not at that level. Mm-hmm. And secondly, you're going to lose juniors early. Yeah. You look at what happened to that Miami or Florida program. They never recovered from, remember that early 2000s, yes. All those guys, they were losing 6, 8, 9 every year. All of a sudden it hit, and Larry Coker could never recover from that. And that's something LSU, Alabama, Florida, Florida State, all the top schools. I had a former college coach tell me this, that in basketball, so much of it is one and done.
It is.
And in football, you got to be 3 and gone.
Right.
You got to look at those guys, no matter what, they're going to be there. 3 years, adios.
And you got to recruit for that. You got to now recruit feeling that ultimately your top players are going after the junior year.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is that the world has changed from this standpoint. The real skilled players of the world, big linemen. When you think about it today, and I tell Bobby Hebert this all the time, when he was playing, there were probably 24 elite defensive ends, tackles, outside linebackers that could rush the quarterback. Today, if they have a dozen, you lucky. Those guys aren't there. You know why? They're playing wide receiver and tight end on offense. And if I've got a 300-pound lineman, he's protecting my multi-million-dollar quarterback.
Right.
So where are all the defensive linemen going? And now because of the speed of the game at the college level, because of all the spread offenses, you have to recruit differently. Those 300-pound defensive linemen, you're not going to see that. You got to recruit lighter guys, more athletic defensive linemen, outside linebackers. The question is, where are they? And when you look even at LSU, what we saw last year with Barkevius Mingo and Sam Montgomery and Benny Logan, all those guys, LeVar Edwards across the board, take a good look. You ain't going to see that again. All those 5-star linemen they got, how many of them played? 1.
Right.
Christian Lacouture. That was it. All the rest of them, they weren't ready for big boy football.
Right. Mike, the draft book, when does it come out, and when can folks start maybe dialing in or get in touch with you to be able to get a copy of it?
Well, the draft's been moved now, so it'll be a May 8th draft, May 8th, 9th, 10th. So it's a little bit later, but we're going to come out with it late March, first couple days of April, so you'll have plenty of time to look at it. So, you know, they can get in touch with me basically anytime now to order it. But right now, it's going to be interesting to see that extra time. And 2 more weeks of me talking about draft.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's oversaturated already, but you can see what the NFL is doing now. The season's going to end mid-May. You're going to have probably 2 weeks downtime or 3 weeks. Then you're at training camp in July. And then from July all the way through to mid-May, nothing but football. And when the Super Bowl ends, free agency, the combine, draft, never ends.
NFL year-round now. And that's the way they want their product, year-round.
No question about it. They want that, and they're selling it.
Yes.
Hey, it's the hottest show in town.
It definitely is. Speaking of the hottest show in town, the Saints go up to Philadelphia. A lot of people believe that they couldn't come out of there with a win. Your thoughts on the game plan, your thoughts on the overall performance by the New Orleans Saints?
Well, when you think about all the talk before then, and there was all kind of writings about how difficult it is to win on the road. 3 to 4 teams won on the road, and it took the Colts an unbelievable football game to come back to beat Kansas City, or it'd have been 4 for 4. And those teams, look at San Francisco, New Orleans, San Diego, all playing out of their environment.
Yes.
It was cold weather in every one of those cities. They were able to win. The Saints got it done, and all year long, and when we did this early in the season, I said, that talk about the greatest show on turf part 2, you can put that aside. This offense isn't that way anymore.
Right.
They're fueled by their defense. Eric, listen, I ain't right a lot of times, but on that one, I was right about that this team has been fueled by their defense, their front being able to get great pressure, and despite injuries to Victor Butler and Kenyon Coleman and Kenny Vaccaro now, Jabari Greer, Patrick Robinson, Will Smith, Jonathan Vilma, you still winning with defense. Had it not been for the injury to Keenan Lewis, you look at Deshaun Jackson, zilch, nothing.
Shut down.
And Shady McCoy, how much money had we won if we said before the game, Mark Ingram would have more rushing yards than Shady McCoy?
Nobody would believe
that. Now, they got a few people that every week predict that Mark Ingram will have that breakout game, but it was a great game plan defensively. But the MO on Nick Foles certainly came true. He's a very accurate quarterback, but he's not willing to take a chance downfield with a throw. He takes the sack. So my thing about it is a rush 3, put 8 in coverage.
Yes.
I thought the Saints did a great job matching up downfield up until the Lewis injury.
Yes.
I thought they did a fantastic job. But one thing that Chip Kelly's got to do, he's got to let the reins go on Nick a little bit to give him some leeway to throw the football downfield. Because if not, one of the things, the difference between a Brady and a Manning and a Breeze and Aaron Rodgers, they're taking that shot downfield. You saw with Foles, if it's not wide open, I'm taking the sack.
Right, no doubt. Not going to take a chance. Speaking of the defense, Rob Ryan has done a masterful job this season. I talked about on my radio show that he probably, when you start looking at all the additions in the offseason, he's the most valuable addition. His ability, again, first of all, to come in and recognize the type of talent he had from day one. Then you augment that with, again, each and every week trying to go into the game plan, taking away the opposing offense's strength, while still masking the deficiencies that he has on his roster, on his team. Talk about Rob Ryan. You break it down. You look at the film every week. What are you seeing?
One of the things, a much more aggressive defensive front than we saw a year ago, where it was a lot of zone coverage. Now you've got a sprinkle of everything. They're coming at you different ways, a lot more press coverage. So it's differently. They're throwing at you a lot differently. The other thing, too, with Rob, and I think he's done a masterful job coaching, but also taking a player who's here and bringing him to here. You look at Cameron Jordan. Look at the progress he's made. Akeem Hicks.
Yes.
Has anybody benefited from going to that 3-4 alignment, but really he plays defensive end than Junior Gillette?
Right.
Kenny Vaccaro, man, he got his PhD, his master's, everything at that safety position.
Never came off the field.
It was unbelievable. It was the matchup situation. He's no ball hawk, but his ability to match up downfield with a tight end and a receiver was evident. Keenan Lewis is coming in, and before the injury, I thought Jabari Greer was having an outstanding season for them. So him being able to take that talent level. Last year, David Hawthorne, he was hurt a lot. You didn't really get to see him.
Sure.
I thought he elevated his play along with Curtis Lofton in the middle. So every player defensively, take that talent, raise it up. Listen, not a lot of coaches can do that. And he was doing it with a lot of talent that was left over from a year ago that gave up the most yardage in NFL history. I'm just telling you, Eric, it's a masterful job done, but even more impressive because you've had all the injuries. But it's an old Richie Pettibone line, but I think it's accurate. Come playoff time, if you have a weakness or you have a major injury, it gets magnified fourfold. That's why this game in Seattle, because of the weather conditions, sort of tells you that if you can't score points, you're going to have to play small ball with Seattle.
Yes.
And hope that you can get some turnovers to get this game in a position for you to win. But even if it ends Saturday, what a great run for Rob Ryan. I know they don't give it out, but he's the assistant coach of the year. No question about it.
Hands down.
And he should be looked at by other teams as a head coach. He maybe doesn't fit the profile, so to speak, of what they look at today. But, man, he has done an unbelievable job.
Saints fans are hoping that obviously he doesn't get an opportunity to be a head coach. And you're right. In the playoffs, your weaknesses will be exploited. But he also has done a great job of again, adjusting on the fly. And you've seen it in each and every game. If something's not working, he is willing. And then, let's face it, I don't think this team gets enough credit, especially on the defensive side, on the intelligence, the aptitude of the players to be able to, again, absorb that game plan and go out and carry that game plan out.
For the most part, it's been next man up, and that has worked. But it gets to the point, you get a saturation point, especially in the secondary now, where the next man up, man, it's a Mount Everest drop off.
It drops back.
Considerably. But they have won when you look at it, and it's really great hope for the future because of the age of a Cameron Jordan, a Junior Gillette, Akeem Hicks, Glenn Foster, Tom Johnson, John Jenkins. And Broderick Bunkley is kind of the veteran of the group, but you look at that, Eric.
They got a maximum effort out of him this year.
Since 2000, we have not seen this defensive front play as well.
Yes.
And when you have all those young players, and you know you got them for a while, Keenan Lewis is still a young player, Kenny Vaccaro going to hit his second season next year, your future is tied to your defense the next couple years, and hopefully you can sprinkle in a few guys offensively because you're going to financially be strapped a little bit because you got to take care of Jimmy Graham, and you're going to have to make some tough decisions on contracts.
Right, and you got Cameron Jordan coming up very shortly as well. I think in 15, his contract will be coming up as well. The MO of this offense has been shock and awe. It's been throwing the football downfield. It's been again putting the ball in the hands of your best player, Drew Brees. They proved again against a bad defense. I mean, again, you cannot compare the Philadelphia defense to what they're going to see this week against Seattle. But they played a physical style of offense against Philadelphia. They ran the football very, very well. De La Puente, I thought, had his best game of the season. And then again, he's been much maligned. Your thoughts on the offensive line, your thoughts on the game plan to run the football and how effectively they ran it against Philly?
One of the things is they ran predominantly right. Jari Evans, Zach Strief.
Yes.
They saw something, and I give Sean a lot of credit and his offensive coaching staff. They saw something on Philly's left side. Hey, we're going to bang, bang, bang away at them. They got it done. Did a great job there. And the offensive line is certainly the best game since the Cowboys. But I'll be honest, they got college teams that could have run that night against the Cowboys. Their defense was horrible that night. But against the Philly defense, in which everybody talked about the speed and everything else, I thought the Saints would maybe do a little bit more business downfield. They found that weakness on Philly's left side, and, man, they just tore them a new hole on that side, running the football over and over, and it set it up, the short passing game, very, very well. So I think they did a masterful job at that. And, again, Mark Ingram, Kyrie Robinson, Sproles is who he is.
Yes.
They really got maximum effort. And when you look at it, is it one catch per game for Robert Meacham where he makes a big play?
Right.
43 yards downfield.
But a great blocker.
And other thing, too, is Kenny Stills. You think about rookie receivers, and a lot of times people said, oh, it takes him a year. He's done a great job in that rookie season coming in. And I think he's the eventual replacement for Lance Moore as the slot receiver. One of the things in the offseason, you're going to have to find you a number one receiver somewhere because of the age of Marcus Colston and Lance and Meacham also. But Drew Brees, man, a lot of people criticize him. Only thing I'm telling you is when you watch it all season long, he hasn't had the protection he's had in years past. And the running game that you saw in Philly, you know, that was just a glimpse. You didn't see that all season at all. I think that when you break it all down, the Saints, I think, have done a great job to get to the divisional round with all the injuries. And certainly this team, you can't compare them offensively to 09 and 11. They were a far better team back then offensively, but much better defensively. because those defenses can't compare to what you have today.
Yeah, that's for sure. Mike Detillier is with us. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. 504-866-3200 is the phone number. Feel free to call in if you have a question or a comment for Mike. Mike, I've watched Teron Armstead over the last few weeks as I go back and look at the game tape. He looks like he is maturing under fire. What are you saying out of Teron Armstead?
Other than the first half against Greg Hardy, he's done a really good job. Again, the one thing in having watched him in college, I knew that his adjustment would be more of the mental part of the game, the technical part. He's played against guys every bit as quick, but the quickness, power part of the NFL was something that he was over his head with. You look at what he did against Trent Cole, and Trent makes the comment about he had the new car smell to him.
Right.
He made one play.
That's right.
And so he did an excellent job going up against Trent Cole in the pass protection part of the game, and that's what he excels at. He's a great athlete. Hopefully, what you can see is his maturing and also the mental part of the game. I talked to Willie Rofe about this, and he says, a lot of times people bring out the mental part of a quarterback or a safety or a linebacker, but when you play in left tackle, you're on an island, and you have to mentally get over that from time to time, you're going to get beat. He said, here's the worst part. I can make, in a 60-play deal, 58 great plays, but everybody remembers the 2 sacks I gave up.
That's right. They will. No doubt about that.
And you got to have a memory, almost like amnesia.
Yes.
You got to put that aside and understand what you did wrong, but also put it aside because you can mentally let that grind on you, almost like a cornerback. Ed Reed used to tell me this all the time about players come into the league. There's a lot of guys that are big and fast and can cover, but what veteran quarterbacks try to do, they break you down mentally, then you make a physical mistake. And I think the same thing can be said about left tackle. I give Armstead a lot of credit. This week will be a big test too.
Huge test.
Because I think they're going to overload that side to see if they can break him down, not physically, but mentally first and then physically. Carolina did that in the first half.
Drew Brees has had his problems on the road with turnovers. He got 2 turnovers again last week, even though the one that steals, you really can't lay on him. Your thoughts about Brees going into this game against Seattle? Let's face it, the weather conditions, cold, windy. They're talking about 25-mile-an-hour winds. You're looking at a situation where they've already been there with the crowd noise. They've been there, done that. But, again, he has really not taken care of the football on the road. Mike, what are you seeing when you're watching Brees, and what do you expect going into this game, especially for a game that I believe they can't afford to turn the football over?
Well, I think crowd noise and wind is the biggest factor on the road. When Drew has had his worst games, it's been windy conditions, not so much the cold. And even the rain, you go back to Carolina, it was pouring down rain. But wind affects a passer like Drew, which is a lot with timing. The other part about it, too, is the crowd noise, because you're trying to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. You know what? You got to trust the play. Call the play as it's given to you, because if you're trying to make adjustments, you're not going to be able to do it. Eric, I think it's paramount that you jump on this team quickly. Now, you're not going to take the crowd completely out of it.
They'll be in it.
But silence them a little bit, and that way you don't have that noise, so to speak, in your ears constantly. I thought early on against Seattle on the Monday night game, the crowd was in it because Seattle was making play after play after play. Drew Brees, and this is a lot of pressure put on him, but when you're down to the final 8, one thing is paramount. He's got to be the best player on the field.
Yes.
You can't do it like during the regular season. Russell Wilson was the best player on the field that night. The Saints did an excellent job against Marshawn Lynch, but Russell Wilson with his feet, his improvisational skills to make plays on the move and then throwing the football, that was one thing in the regular season. They didn't get a sniff of a pass rush. I think Paris Harrison had 1 sack, but it was like in the third quarter. You didn't get any pressure on Wilson. He was just throwing darts downfield to open receivers. And Seattle's going to play a lot of bump and run. They're going to play a lot of one-on-one coverage, and they're going to try to bracket Jimmy Graham. Now, remember in the first game, Sproles caught 7 passes coming out the backfield, Pierre 4.
Yes.
In this game, do they maybe spring Kyrie Robinson as a receiver? And we saw him in the practice sessions. He catches the ball really well. I want that 210-pound guy running downfield. I think one of the things in that is Seattle's linebackers converge very quickly on Sproles and Thomas the first game.
Mike, it's hard to change what you are and who you are, what your identity is when you get into the playoffs. But the Saints are in a position where they are road warriors. They're going to be on the road each and every week, depending on how far they go, in probably inclement conditions when it comes to the weather. They proved against a bad defense last week they could run to the football. Looking at this game going forward, is this something they have to do on Saturday? Do they have to run the football and maybe be, at least for right now, maybe a run-first offense and allow the run to set up the pass, whereas throughout the Peyton era, they've been a passing offense that set up the run. Your thoughts?
Well, one of the things in that first game is you fell behind so quickly.
Yes.
Well, you couldn't run the ball.
Could not run the ball
at that point in time. So I think it's paramount that you do try to run the ball and to give some sense of balance. They're always going to use the short pass like a run.
Right.
That's part of the MO of this team. You got to get Jimmy Graham more involved. I think that's the big part offensively up against Seattle that really wasn't a factor at all in the regular season. You got to get Jimmy more involved, better pass protection too. Boy, you saw Seattle was coming hard off the edge. They had no fear of the Saints running the ball, so they were in that kind of Panther position where they were just shooting off the line of scrimmage, coming after Drew. Winning in the trenches. And that is the biggest part of this game. You've got to win the game in the trenches, offensive, defensive line. You got the stew kicked out of you in Seattle last time on both sides of the ball.
Physically, an offensive line would prefer to be able to run the football rather than play finesse and to be able to pass block. And I think one of the problems the Saints have had really throughout the Peyton era, and especially again at times this season, they want to turn the running game on when they want to turn it on like a spigot. I really believe they got to come out, as you mentioned, they got to be physical with this team. You got to impose your physical will and get those linemen a little bit tired so in the fourth quarter you can take your shots. Teams seem to have, again, tried to take away the screen play, the short passing play away from this team. Can they adjust going forward knowing that teams are leaning toward taking away that particular big part of their offense?
There is no dominant team in the NFL when you look at it. As good as Seattle is or Denver is, they got flaws. When I look at Seattle in the games they haven't played well, what has been the problem? They haven't stopped the run.
Right.
You go back to the Monday night game against the Rams, Zach Stacy, great effort.
Right.
Mike James goes, they had a 21-0 lead in Tampa Bay with Mike James running the football on them. You look at the San Francisco game, Frank Gore, big game against them. Arizona ran the football against them. So that tells me if those teams did it, you have to do it too.
Yes.
You got to keep that running game part of the equation here. And you have different running backs. It's almost not running back by committee, but running back in that they all do something a little bit different.
Agreed.
And so utilize that. But the speed of Seattle can't be matched by a lot of teams. That front seven can run to the football. And everybody talks about their secondary, which is terrific.
Right.
Earl Thomas is the best free safety in the pro game. You look at Richard Sherman, best one-on-one cover cornerback in the game. You've got to be able to pick on the other side. No Brandon Brown are there anymore. Cam Chancellor is a very physical, strong safety, all-pro guy.
Yes.
But I think you got to be able to target one side of the field. My thing is I ain't going toward Richard Sherman. I'm going to the other side of the field to see what I can do on that part. The other thing that makes Seattle dangerous, great special teams. Kicking game, punting game, return game, and also their coverage game. A young man from Northwestern State, Jeremy Lane. Talk about a guy who got job not being in the Pro Bowl.
Yes.
He was the best gunner in the NFL last season. And how he didn't make the Pro Bowl is beyond me. They do a great job there. You cannot lose that part of the game. Be even with them, but don't let them have a big play in the special teams part of the game. And Eric, what's unbelievable, that this football team, as good as it's been on defense, has not had a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown all season. The only team not to have it.
No, I know.
It's amazing.
It is.
You have won this many games, and you think about 09, 7 touchdowns on defense, and you've got nothing this year on that side of the ball. The ball just hasn't bounced your way. Corey White had the one chance to do it, fumbled the football at the 2-yard line.
The receivers have had a problem in getting off the jam. This secondary, unlike Philadelphia, in Philadelphia maybe they had to help their secondary a bit. Here, you can leave those guys on an island. How critical is it for these guys to play physical from the beginning of the game, get off the jam, get open, and when Breeze does have to throw the football or choose to throw the football, to give him something. There was a real problem in game one. They got out physical at the line of scrimmage when it came to the wide receiving core.
Yeah, they lost the battle up front, but they couldn't get open downfield. Now, you're talking about bad weather conditions. That long ball is going to be taken away from you.
With the wind.
So now a physical defense becomes even better because you tightening up everything.
Shrinking the field.
You shrinking the field down extremely on a short period here. So it's going to be interesting of how they utilize in what I call box out positions. And I think in a game like this, almost using your receivers, especially Jimmy Graham, Marcus Colston, like a big power forward. Just sit them downfield, let them get in a position, throw the football, and hit that tight window between the defender and the receiver. I think that's critical. So you're going to have to adjust your offense because the big play element, if you got 20, 25-mile-an-hour winds, you're not going to be able to throw the long ball. But neither will Seattle.
Right.
But I think Seattle's deal is, you know what? We play that type of game. We'll give the ball to Marshawn Lynch. We'll throw the ball short. And here's the contrast this weekend. You've got Brady, you got Manning, you got Breeze, and then you got the young kids.
All the young guns.
You got Kaepernick, you got Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Andrew Luck.
Yes.
And their deal is cut the gloves off me. You know what? We playing for today. Man, listen, we just want to get to the championship game. They're going to use their feet more. And you saw it in the Green Bay game. Even Aaron Rodgers, with the kind of shoulder that was a little bit iffy, he used his feet a lot. Improvisational plays. And I think just like a boxer, you know what? Bare knuckle it. Cut the gloves off me. And I think you're going to see Russell Wilson, Kaepernick, Newton, Luck say, you know what? There is no tomorrow for us. We got to win it now. And a lot of that having to do with using the athletic ability to run and also extend the play.
Yes.
Because if you can buy some time to get a receiver open downfield, that's what you want to do. That's what makes the game so different today. When you have these athletic quarterbacks, not only their rushing skills, the other part of extending a play, you can only cover for so long.
Right. And it's a debilitating play as well. When a quarterback can get on the edge and you think you've got him, you've done everything perfectly, and then, of course, he makes a little bit more time with his feet, is able either to take off and run, as we've seen some of those quarterbacks do, and to be able to make first downs, maybe get in big chunks of yardage, or, again, as you mentioned, extending that play, allowing that receiver a couple seconds to get open, because, as you mentioned, you can only cover so long.
The other part about it is, you saw it last week, the referees let them play. Almost like in an NBA championship game, just let them play.
It's kind of been the theme of the playoffs across the board.
And I think that is kind of an edict from the league. Hey, listen, you could call defensive holding every play.
Yes.
Because you see all the pulling and tugging. They're hitting the guys 9, 10, 12 yards downfield. But you see all the tugging of the jerseys and everything. They'll let it go. So I think the defensive coaches are telling them, listen, get away with what you can get away with until they call it. But you know what? Let's do it. Because the referees are letting us do it today. And because really all the rules have been set for the offense.
Right.
But they're letting those defensive guys kind of get away with things that during the regular season they would call it.
No doubt about it. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Each and every Thursday night, 6 o'clock, right here on WLAE TV. The phone number is 504-866-3200. My guest tonight, Mike Detillier. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll break it down on the defensive side of the ball. We'll also talk a little bit about what's happening in recruiting, possible defections from LSU when it comes to the junior eligibles, and, of course, the senior class over at Tulane as well. That's coming up next here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.
You're watching WLAE, New Orleans Public Television. Find us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Got a great guest for you tonight. Mike Detillier of WWL Radio. And, of course, the M&D Draft Report. We're talking Saints. We'll be talking a little of the college football in just a few minutes as well. 866-3200 is the phone number. And, Mike, big challenge for this defense. Last game, they were able to control Marshawn Lynch, but again, Russell Wilson really went nuts on him. We talked a little bit about the fact that you've got to contain Russell Wilson. They lose Kenny Vaccaro. That's a huge impact when you start talking about this defense. Harper and Jenkins, a lot is going to be laid on their shoulders now, especially, again, when you start looking at the possibility of having to do run support and then getting back and dealing with that passing game. What's your thoughts on how the Saints have to play the Seattle Seahawks on Saturday to win defensively?
One, you got to tackle well. I think that's paramount in this game. You got to be able to tackle well.
Which they've done pretty much for the season.
They've done a pretty good job with it. Golden Tate leads all receivers with yardage after the catch. So you can't let him run around. Now you got Percy Harvin involved. Right. And other than up until this year, for two out of the last 3 years, he led the NFL in yards after the catch. Really one of the premier slot receivers in the NFL. The scary thing is the tight end, Zach Miller. He led the team in receptions during the regular season against the Saints in that regular season game. How you match up with him downfield. Because, again, I go back to the long ball is going to be taken away because of those weather conditions. Yes. You've got to be able to tackle and not let Golden Tate and Percy Harvin take a 5-yard pass and turn it into a 55-yard pass, reception and run. So I think tackling is going to be key. You always want to try to slow down Marshawn Lynch, but you don't want him banging away at you. But, you know, other than Doug Martin in game 2, you think about it, no running back has really went off. Zach Stacy had a nice game, but I'll be honest, that game, the Saints looked totally out of it. But you go back throughout the season, other than Doug Martin, they have done a real good job containing those running backs. Tackling is key.
Right. You look at what happened last time against Russell Wilson. I think they've done a nice job and maybe learned a lesson from not containing Russell Wilson in that game against Seattle. Talk a little bit about that, how they've done so far, and what they have to do to be able to keep him in the pocket.
Well, that's a lot easier said than done because, again, the improvisation of a guy like a Russell Wilson, that's what's changed the game so much. You see it in college football, what Johnny Manziel can do on it with his feet. I mean, he changes the game.
Yes.
You can say, you know what, I had great coverage, I contained him, and he does something that you can't draw up on the blackboard and say, stop. That's what Russell Wilson can do. That's what a Kaepernick can do. Even Andrew Luck, who a lot of people don't think he's a great athlete, but he is a terrific,
tremendous athlete.
He's unbelievable. And then we know about Cam Newton because of the power speed part of it. That's a lot easier said than done to contain him. What you really want to do is keep him in the pocket, pressure, and force him to throw the football. Make a decision downfield. What happened in the regular season was you gave him way too much time to pick and choose and look around downfield. What you want to do is to get that pressure from the outside, force him to contain himself and make that throw. Because that's when most of these young quarterbacks, there is a little bit of confusion because of lack of experience in that part. So my thing about it is don't let him get to the edges because once they break containment, you saw in the Green Bay game against San Francisco, they came with a blitz.
Yes.
Guy gets out of alignment. Kaepernick just takes off. Game, set, match, all over with. You saw in the first game, in the regular season, Junior Gillette crashing down hard inside. Russell Wilson reads that on the read option, takes off. And in theory, everybody said, well, David Hawthorne should catch him. Man, come on. Physics is David Hawthorne's not going to catch Russell Wilson out in the open field. No matter what type of angle you got, he can outrun you at that space. So keeping him in the pocket, I think is going to be important in this football game.
Some will say that the weak spot of that Seattle offensive line is the guards, and maybe you have to attack them from the inside out with guys like Akeem Hicks. Maybe almost the type of pressure that we see that teams try to put on Drew Brees because of Wilson's short stature. Your thoughts?
If you're going to send extra people up the middle, you leave that middle open where they can drag that tight end right over the middle. And boy, he's one-on-one.
He's a heck of a tight end, too.
And Zach is a very good receiver, so you got to understand, I think both quarterbacks would like to see that pressure up the middle, because what that means is you leave an open gap. Now, if you can get to the quarterback, that's great. But if not, then you got a lot of room for that tight end or that receiver cross in the middle to hit them on there. So there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. But bottom line is you got to have balance, turnovers. You can't be a -2. Right. If you're a -2 in this game, you got no shot. No shot to win.
I don't think they can turn the ball over, Mike. I got to be honest with you. I don't know if they can get away with it in this game. They got away with it in Philadelphia. I don't know if they can get away with it in this game.
Eric, I did a research back over the last 10 years at playoff time that if you are a -2 or more in the playoffs, you lose 85% of the games. Here's the best part. Two teams did it this weekend.
Right.
The Colts
and the Saints.
Right. And it ended up, or the percentage would have been closer to 90%
right.
instead of 85. Amazing that you won that game with a -2. You go to Seattle, you're not going to win that game with a -2.
Special teams, who has the edge here?
Oh, Seattle. I just think their coverage units, their punting, the punting part, certainly the Saints with Morstead, who's been a great punter, kickoff guy. Their place kicker has been outstanding. Mm-hmm. Shane Graham hasn't missed.
Right.
You got to give him credit there. But their coverage units and return game has been better than the Saints.
And it gets a little bit of a boost here, depending on what they're going to use Harvin in that capacity as well.
I'm putting him returning punts.
Right.
But the thing with him is, how long does he last?
Right.
You know what? In practice, you can simulate all these things. My thing about it is, first time he goes down with that hip, how does he respond to that?
Well, it's going to be cold. It's going to be, again,
anybody who's got back, knee, hip problems, that cold and that rain gets to you pretty good.
No doubt about it. 504-866-3200. Mike Detillier, our guest from WWL 870 AM Radio. Let's go to Renee on the North Shore. Renee, you're welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports with Mike Detillier.
Yeah, Mike, I got a question for you. Do you think that if the Saints just use Jimmy Graham as a decoy, do you think that would allow the other receivers to get open?
No. In this game, in essence, because Seattle, they really want that. They want to go one-on-one with Colston and Lance and Robert Meacham. Who they fear? Jimmy Graham. They really fear Graham more than anything. One of the things, Renee, I'm interested in this game, and it's something that Coach Payton talked to us about before the season started, the two tight end sets. We haven't seen a lot of that with Watson and Graham in the lineup at the same time. Do they spring that on Seattle to see, because in the short areas of the game, you got a big man who can post up downfield. I really think that, Jimmy has to play big in this game, because I think Seattle has no fear at all of the Saints receivers playing. And just look at what happened in the regular season. Jimmy Graham's got to play big in this game. No decoy here. He's got to be a guy that can catch some passes, 4 to 5. More uses also to a Ben Watson because of his size downfield.
Yes.
Ben is underrated as a receiver.
I would agree with that. He's done a nice job when he's had the opportunity to get into the pattern.
And he did in Cleveland and did in New England when he got the chance.
No doubt. Mike, before we kind of talk about the overall season and we kind of get into the collegiate game, who wins and why?
If this was a good weather game, I would say the Saints got a real shot here. But I think because of the weather conditions, the wind, the rain, and the Saints are a high-risk offense. Yes. Listen, you got to put your cards on the table here. That's what brung you there. I just think eventually all the defensive losses catch up with you. I think in a close game, Seattle wins this like 27-20, but I think they get a fistful of the Saints. And if the Saints can get turnovers, you got a chance to beat them on the road. I just think that home field advantage stuff is overrated come playoff time. But you know what? I think every year there is one play or one player that makes a play that you don't expect. You go back to Denver, Baltimore last year, in a game in which Denver's got it in their pockets. Trendon Holiday runs back a punt and a kickoff for a score. Who makes the play at the end? Jacoby Jones makes the play. And it basically set the fire. The Saints have to have that sort of play. Really where you'd like to see it is on defense. For them maybe to come up with a big interception, or the ball gets popped in the air and somebody gets it and runs it in for a score. If you can do that, you got a chance. But if not, really, Seattle is the healthiest they've been all season long, playing on their turf. And the weather conditions, I think, all favor Seattle at that point.
Conducive, they're built for those weather conditions where the Saints are not.
I think they're better suited for it at that point. But what I want to see is how these young quarterbacks handle the pressure of playoff football. And a lot of the young quarterbacks are saying privately, so to speak, let's see what the old men, how they handle it. You don't think there's pressure on Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and Tom Brady? Listen, you and I won't live long enough to see another quarterback and a head coach win as many big games, go to as many Super Bowls and win it as Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. You and I will never live long enough to see that happen. It's amazing. What happens if San Diego goes to Denver and beats Peyton Manning? And the greatest season a quarterback's ever had could go for nilch on that point. But I really think the Saints will stay in this game to the end. I just got a feeling that something happens to break them down, maybe on the defensive side of the football, giving up a big play. That is the deciding factor here.
Mike, your overall thoughts on the season? Again, it's been a kind of a weird season. You know, they get out the box very, very quickly. They get this big lead. A lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of turnovers, a lot of penalties that led to losing to inferior teams like the Jets in St. Louis. They had a trouble closing out games against New England and Carolina. But overall, I mean, again, when you look at the body of work, it's not what you expected, especially after the great start. What are your thoughts on the overall season?
But if you think about it before the season and you were told you could get to the divisional round of the playoffs, deal me in.
You'd take it in a second.
Deal me in. And when you think about this team with all the injuries, I think that's the part a lot of people are missing, is the fact that all these injuries you've had on defense, and everybody has them, but not the kind of numbers that the Saints have had, and at critical positions. Man, you got to give this team like an A- for what they've done. But the real story has been no one could have predicted how good the defense would have played this year. I think a lot of people are a little bit disappointed because of the hype of Greatest Show on Turf Part 2. I think those heady days are gone. But what really aids you in a shot over the next 3 years to win a championship is how good you are on defense. Strong and all defense. Those young puppies are going to come back. You got a chance to be really good, and especially if you can aid Drew Brees up front along the offensive line and find him a big play receiver.
It's kind of going to be my next question. You know, I've equated the losses on the offensive line to kind of what LSU has gone through with the loss of so many of their juniors. Eventually, it catches up with you. We talked about it the last time you were on the show. When you lose Pro Bowl players and you don't bring, or all pro players in the mode of a Carl Nix, and you don't bring in guys that are as good or better, eventually is going to hurt you. And it has bit them this year in terms of the offensive line.
You know, Bobby and I do the show, and a lot of times he says next man up. And I always tell him, depends on who the next man is.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, because, you know, the next guy isn't nearly as good as what you are. And so when you look at it, I do think it's right along the offensive line. You aren't as good as you are in 09 and 11, those two teams, because, listen, Brian De La Puente, he gives everything he's got. He works his tail off. He's not as good as Jonathan Goodwin. Ben Grubbs, he ain't in the same zip code as Carl Nix.
Amen to that.
When Carl Nix was healthy, he was a man out there. He was the best guard in the game. And Jermon Bushrod, man, you can't even compare what you saw during the season with Charles Brown. The future is, if you're convinced that Armstead's your guy at left tackle, then it's cleaning up the middle. And I think that's where you have to look at come draft time, and maybe in veteran free agency where you're not going to have a lot of money, but a guy who's got some experience, who's played that position. I think eventually Tim Lolito will be moved from guard to center. He's a big man. He's a bigger guy than De La Puente. Showed a lot of potential, certainly in the practice sessions in preseason. I think he's eventually the starting center for you somewhere down the line. Ben Grubbs has been the biggest disappointment,
Yes.
to be honest with
Hasn't
you. For the
lived up
money,
to the hype.
yeah, because he's been a good player.
Yes.
But man, when you're getting paid that kind of money, you're expected to
Upper
be
echelon.
a big time player. How this Pro Bowl deal got voted in, I mean, and listen,
Popularity contest.
that's a joke across the board.
It is.
The other thing too is how much they miss Devery Henderson.
Yes.
Devery was a guy that I think early on you said you were disappointed. He would drop a lot of passes. But once Drew Brees came to town, it wasn't the case, and Drew trusted him on the deep ball. And I think that you can play small ball for a little while, and then defenses start to adjust to it. One of the things this football team needs is what I call the nuclear receiver. A guy in one play, it's over with.
Is Joe Morgan that guy?
He showed some flashes of it, but give me another guy.
Right.
Give me another guy that can stretch that defense vertically, and then you're doing some business. Not that Drew Brees is known for the deep ball skills, but it was always something he had in his pocket.
Right.
And I equate it to kind of having the nuclear bomb, so to speak. You've got it. The threat is you possibly using it. And I think you have to adjust to that defensively. So I think in the offseason, one of the things you have to get better at up front along the offensive line, wide receiver, safety. Because you're going to have to make a decision with Roman Harper financially,
right,
and what you want to do with Malcolm Jenkins.
Who is a free agent.
So I think that those are the three areas to look for. The other area is, I know Darren Sproles made a big kickoff return, and then they got set up with the horse collar.
Yes.
This team has to get better in the return game. I think their coverage units, Morstead's been terrific as a punter. Maybe the most valuable special teams guy since Martin Anderson's been on this team. It's going to be interesting to see what you do with Shane Graham as a veteran kicker. But the threat of that punt returner, I think, is always something you want to get. You want to get a guy that scares the dickens out of that punter and maybe forces him to look what Ted Ginn Jr. did for Carolina. I think he's underrated for what he's done to that football team. He forces you as a punter to say, you know what?
Yeah.
I ain't kicking to him. I'm kicking this way or that way, but I ain't kicking it to him.
That's right, and I would agree. I think that going into the offseason, they've got to get bigger at that center position. Jonathan Goodwin, one of the things that you saw with Goodwin, especially when you're trying to be able to allow Brees to climb that pocket ladder, is to have the ability to be able to open up that hole for him. And
Jeff Fain did it before him.
He did.
Did a really good job.
De La Puente has tried, but physically he's just not built
physics.
for it.
You just look at it. It's just physics. Brian has done, and he's given everything he's got.
As I mentioned, best game I think he's played in a long time against Philadelphia. Did a great job.
But it's hard for you to say, I'm going to draft a center and put him in. Now, the Pouncey brothers have been a different story. They've been able to do it. But it's very few centers that can come into this league because you're not only playing your position, you're getting everybody else in alignment. So that's where I'm interested to see in training camp what happens with Lolito. I think he's got a year under his belt, and he's a bigger player than Brian De La Puente. I'd put him at the center position and then find me a guard.
Well, that would really help because, again, as you mentioned, cash strap, there's only so much money to go around.
There's only so way you can do. You got to develop your young players.
You definitely do.
That's why the draft is so important for this football team.
And they've done a great job of developing linemen in the past, so it'll be interesting to see if that happens. Let's head back to the phone lines. Mike Detillier of M&D Draft Report and WWL 870 AM Radio is our guest. Tevin is in Hammond. Tevin, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports. Tevin, you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Your question,
Yes.
sir.
My question is, which one of the Saints running back has had the most success for the extreme conditions that the Saints are going to face Saturday in Seattle?
Well, I think because probably you're not going to have Pierre Thomas, you know what Sproles is going to do. He's an edge guy, receiver coming out the backfield. Mark Ingram's got to play big. The other thing, too, is the hidden guy, Kyrie Robinson.
Yes.
The one thing with Mark, and I give him credit, and I'm not trying to compare player to player, but he reminded me a little bit of Reggie Bush coming out of SC, where he'd shuffle his feet up to the line of scrimmage and then try to take it to the edge, where you're going to get caught. The one thing he's become is a more decisive runner, trusting his eyes and his running instincts. Much better over the last 5 or 6 weeks.
Right.
Trusting what he sees, getting what he can get.
Yes.
And he's become a more decisive runner. I think a lot of times when you play at the college level, those holes are so much bigger.
Especially at Alabama.
Or you Bush at SC. But, you know, and Reggie's been a different runner.
Yes, he has.
When he's went to Miami
Yes.
and then Detroit. Now, he lays the ball on the turf a little bit too much for me.
Much more patient, much better vision.
And decisive,
Yes.
running between the tackles.
Yes.
That's what I see with Mark. He's got to be a decisive runner. The one thing with Kyrie Robinson, he's decisive. Man, when he hits that hole, he's coming out the other end. And I give him credit because I talked to him the second day at training camp, and he was like a deer in the headlights. Because man, I'm at West Texas A&M. We got like 8 or 9 plays. I'm coming here. You know, the playbook is, 8 inches thick. And I got to learn that. And he was just trying to digest all that. But you could see he's got a lot of talent. The one thing, and I'm wondering about, is he is a really good receiver coming out of the backfield. And you always kind of maybe hold something back.
Right.
Do you swing Kyrie out on the edge and you got a 215-pound back out in the open field and see what happens? He catches the ball really well. I watched him a lot in training camp. He catches the ball clean coming out of the backfield. If you've got something in your hip pocket, that may well be it.
Keith is in Terrytown. Keith, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports with our guest, Mike Detillier.
Hey, man. I enjoy listening to you guys, man. I like you. Both of you guys, man. Both
Thank
of y'all
you, Keith.
very incisive on what you talk about. But my question is for Mike. And Mike, you said something earlier about the receiving core of the Saints. I think that this receiving core is really better than the receiving core that they had 3 years ago.
Oh, no, Keith, no. That receiving core years ago, they were healthier and younger. Robert Meacham could really stretch the field, and he makes that one big play. And also, too, with Marcus, you can see that the injuries have kind of eaten away at him a little bit. And listen, when you get older, those injuries is harder to come back from. Lance Moore's an older player.
Right.
The one thing that I really like is the development of Kenny Stills, because you can see he's a guy that can really help your football team. What you don't have, now I guess you could say Marcus Colston is your number one option downfield. When he's healthy, he's been a really good player. Is that you're projecting this a year down the road. You hope that you still have, some gap there with Marcus.
And you hope Nick Toon can come on.
Well, Nick's been a major disappointment.
He has.
Come on.
Let's face it.
Listen, he's a prodigy
He was
player.
there for the taking all year long.
And the baton was, they wanted him to take it.
Bad.
And crucial times in games, he's not made the play. That's the surprising part, because he was a guy, grew up with this. The NFL, he should have picked this up much quicker. He has really struggled with this at this point. And listen, Robert Meacham's not on this team other than the fact San Diego's paying most of his salary.
Agreed.
The Saints aren't paying a lot of money for Robert at this point.
And let's face it, he is utilized more in the running game.
Right,
than
he's a
anything
good
else.
blocker.
He's a great blocker.
He's a
downfield,
very good blocker.
No doubt. DJ is in New Orleans East. DJ, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric, Mike.
All right, DJ.
I had a question, Eric, for Mike. He was talking about the Saints needing, someone punt returner and all, and a wide receiver. And the first thought I had was Odell Beckham.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
Do you think, if they're looking at second round, do you think he'd be available at the end of that round, where the Saints would be picking?
DJ, he won't get out of the top 20 picks. I'm honest with you.
As soon as he gets to the combine, right?
And once you get a better look at him, man, you talk about a guy with a pair of mitts on him, and he can run. And when he's going to get to the combine and run that 4.34 and 42 vertical, here's my thing about this. And I see all these projections about second round. A 5'8", 165-pound Tavon Austin was the 8th pick in the draft. Man, I want Odell Beckham long before I want Tavon Austin on my football team. He's a lot smarter player. He can give me the punt return skills. He's a more skilled receiver. And when I look at this draft, and the world is changing, 6 receivers in the top 22 picks, and Odell's going to be one of those guys. I'd love to see Odell in the Saints uniform. Absolutely love to see it. I think you got a much better shot with Jarvis Landry.
Right.
Now, Jarvis is not the speed guy, but in this offense, his ability, man, great hands, route runner.
Physical, could get off the line.
Physical player. Reminds me so much of a young Antoine Bolden when he came out of Florida State. Very similar type talents.
To Kremley on the West Bank. Kremley, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hi, good afternoon, or good evening. How you doing?
This one.
My question is with The Saints going to Seattle and the win factor playing a major issue. Drew threw 2 key interceptions last week. This Saturday, my main concern is with the win factor playing, is he going to be accurate? Will he be able to complete all his passes compared to how last time we had those 2 crucial turnovers?
I hope so because, again, the passing game's still part of it. But what it does when that wind takes effect, it takes away the long ball. I think more than anything,
I would agree.
that medium and long ball throws. So what you got to do is utilize what I think Drew does best, the short areas of the game, out to the backs, to the tight ends. And again, I bring that up because before the season started, there was a lot of stuff about Watson Graham. We didn't see a lot of 2 tight end sets with the Saints.
And
now,
if you have, it's been Josh Hill.
And it has. My thing about it is, in this game, you might see a lot more of the 2 tight end sets and see how Seattle adjusts to try to see how they time up downfield. Again, I bring up the point of the big post-up position downfield, giving Drew that target, getting him 5-6 yards. This isn't going to be a game of 50-yard plays and 30-yard plays. It's going to be dink, dunk, get it downfield, and hopefully you get you a score. What it affects the win, too, is it's special teams.
Oh, the kicking
you
game.
kick that ball. I never remember Martin Anderson telling me, he was in San Francisco, he's like, man, what's unbelievable about kicking in this stadium is I come up to the ball one time and I went back, the ball and the wind was hitting me in the face. By the time I walked back, it was hitting me in the ear. So the wind changes direction. When you got a 25-mile-an-hour wind, now you hopefully get the wind kicking with you, but what is this against you? And, with Shane being a veteran kicker, his range is from 44 yards in.
Right.
Now, if you've got the wind with you, maybe you get a little bit more.
It shaves it off some yardage, no doubt.
But if you got the wind against you,
right.
then you got some issues there.
No doubt. Final question. Let's head to Russell in New Orleans. Russell, welcome. You're on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Yes. Hello, gentlemen. Enjoy your show.
Thank you, Russ.
My question is for Mike. Mike, I'd like to revisit the Rob Ryan defense this year, how we've lost so many of our starters, but we're able to still play, at a high level. In comparison to last year when he was with Dallas, the same sort of scenario happened, but yet they weren't able to do it, and ultimately he lost his job there. Mm-hmm. How do you compare the two? Is it that our backups maybe are better than Dallas's, or what's the situation as you see it?
I really think you had better depth on this football team than the Cowboys did. Also, too, you take away DeMarcus Ware, their defensive line is rather average. I think the one thing that got underrated with the Saints this year is their defensive front.
Yes. With
Cam Jordan. I think everybody kind of knows who Cam is now.
But a front that I don't think they knew they had, right, Mike? I mean, going in with the youth.
I think no one knew exactly how good. It was the development of Junior Gillette, John Jenkins coming in as a rookie, and he played really big. Because remember, early on, Bunkley missed a bunch of games early on in the season, and then you got Akeem Hicks, who I think of all the defensive linemen may be the most gifted. You got him coming back. I'm telling you, the big difference is depth, and also you take Ware out of that defensive front for the Cowboys, they aren't even an average football team.
They're not even ordinary, no doubt about it. Mike, it's been great. I mean, it's absolutely blown by, and really appreciate your time tonight. Again, we'll be looking for the M&D draft report that'll be coming out. It'll be on the
late March, early April.
Late March, early April. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this show each and every Friday night at 10 o'clock right here on WLAE and Pelican Sports Television. Don't forget, you can also catch me on the radio weekdays, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. on 990 AM WGSO. Remember, you can also download the podcast. So if you missed any of the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports, you can go to ericasher.com and you can download the podcast there or check out the previous episodes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at Eric_Asher. Special thanks to the production staff here at WLAE, Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juno, and my producer, director, William Hill. For Mike Detillier, I'm Eric Asher. Have a great evening. We'll see you right back here next Thursday night for Inside New Orleans Sports.
Who dat?
Good evening.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by the Union Capital Corporation and Natel's Air Conditioning and Heating, a proud sponsor of the St. Jude Dream Home.